Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to welcome the Acting Director of the Census Bureau, Dr. Ron Jarmin, as well as Robert Goldenkoff, Director of Strategic Issues, and David Powner, Director of Information Technology. I apologize if I've mispronounced your names, but we can get into a conversation about what I've been called throughout the years. No one rolls their R's anymore.
When New Yorkers can mangle language like Texans, we can really mangle.
I started by saying that my statement will be a little longer than yours, but you understand. The Census Bureau is now at a critical stage in preparations for the 2020 census. Final testing is underway in Providence. Staffing requirements are being finalized, leases are being decided, and rollout plans are happening now. Unfortunately, significant questions remain about the course of the 2020 census and this administration's commitment to ensuring an accurate count. Before I go further, I want to thank the chairman for working with our side and the Senate to greatly increase Census Bureau funding in the fiscal year 2018. The $2.8 billion included in that bill will help ensure the Bureau can ramp up critical preparations to allow the decennial census to get back on track and to replicate the successful partnership program of 2010. However, the Bureau's costs will continue to increase as we get closer to 2020, and I'm interested to hear how you're using the FY 2018 money and how your 2019 budget requirements are evolving. However, with this administration, it often seems like we go one step forward and 2 steps back. No sooner does this subcommittee attempt to rectify significant funding problems and in a bipartisan fashion support the efforts of the Census Bureau when we are forced to address another census crisis of the administration's own making. Of course, I'm referring to the recent addition of a citizenship question to the 2020 census form. The addition of a citizenship question to the decennial census without justification or testing is deeply troubling. It points to the politicization of what should be a nonpartisan effort, a problem underlined by reports that this question was added over the objections of career officials at the Bureau. The constitutional requirements to count all persons in our nation every 10 years allows the census to give us an important snapshot of how our communities are growing and changing. Unfortunately, with a citizenship question added to the form, many individuals will simply refuse to respond. I represent a large immigrant community in the Bronx that feels targeted by this administration. This latest action will undermine efforts to build trust and participation in the census in my hometown and elsewhere, which in turn will undermine census accuracy, but also distort the important functions that we use this information for, like the distribution of federal formula funds. Ironically, this will greatly harm not just blue states, but so-called red states too, like Texas, Arizona, and Florida. All of those states could lose congressional seats and electoral votes that they would otherwise gain in an accurate census. Aside from these important concerns, there's a significant and literal cost to asking a citizenship question in the 2020 census. We know that Census Bureau experts and the Census Scientific Advisory Committee anticipate a lower initial response to the 2020 census because of the inclusion of this question. Additionally, we know that lower response rates translate into higher costs for an in-person follow-up visits. Add to that the lack of testing of this subject matter, and we here at the Appropriations Committee will be left to foot the bill, a larger bill than anticipated, without a clear understanding of what that will be. That is why, in part, why I hope to work with the chairman and others to prevent these problems from occurring by precluding the Census Bureau from moving forward with this wrong-headed proposal. I know we all share the goal of accurate and cost-effective decennial census. However, it is troubling that at this late stage, we still have serious questions about the administration's commitment to the same. And I'm looking forward to that discussion today. Before I end, Mr. Chairman, let me just say that at these committee hearings, we always try to keep the issues on the issues, if you will, and not get into personal feelings. But I personally feel offended that part of that citizenship question asks the following: were you born in the United States? And then you answer yes or no, or you skip it. That's what will happen with some people. Then it asks, were you born, and it lists all the territories, Puerto Rico, so on. Now, the census form doesn't ask, were you born in Texas? Were you born in California? Were you born in New York? But it does ask, were you born in a territory? If I fill it out correctly and not boycott that question, I will become part of a group of people that wrong-minded people, or people who hate, or people who are not in tune with what should be, will say, look, we have 5, 10 million people who were born in a territory, or we have X amount of people who were not born. They will be seen as not being born fully Americans, when in fact I was born an American citizen in a territory. Which then begs the question that I've been asking for years: why not include the territories in the total count? In other words, what is the population of the United States? Is it the 50 states and then the territories, which is what we do now? No, the full population is everybody who lives under the American flag, and that should be counted as one number. So you don't have X amount of Hispanics, you have X amount plus Puerto Rico, plus the Virgin Islands, plus other places. And so this question troubles me personally, and it offends me personally, because it sets me apart. I grew up in New York since the age of 8. I served in the military. I'm a member of Congress. I've been blessed, and I can't be prouder of being an American. And to single me out, or to single my community out by saying, were you born in a territory? The question asks itself, why are we asking these questions? What is it that we hope to gain, unless we're going to use it for something good? If you tell me, were you born in a territory, and then you include it in the total population of the U.S., we can discuss that. But if you're just going to allow people to single it out, that small percentage of Americans who still can't get used to the fact that we exist, or that Barack Obama was president, you know who I'm talking about, they will get to use this information in the wrong way. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that I took extra time, but it's been a long time since a question or an issue bothered me personally more than this one. Thank you. Thank you. Just a comment before I ask my questions. There are some people who may react to this and apply pressure on themselves by not answering the question. And therefore, there's even some groups who I don't support asking for a boycott of the census. And what I've told them is that we work too hard, all of us, to get people in certain communities, especially in the minority community, to fill out the census form, for it now to go back. You know, and this is being transmitted to the world, so they, you know, I'm going to get a lot of comments about, you know, you should be part of the boycott. Well, I don't believe in the boycott, because we work too hard to get people to believe in the census. On the other hand, if the census brings fear or pressure that this is going to take another route and misinformation goes out there, it begs the question, why would you ask it this time, other than the way you've been asking it on the long form, which has not caused much problems, if any. So that's, you know, keep harping on that, but it has to be. Mr. Jarmin, it has been, Director Jarmin, it has been reported that Secretary Ross made the decision to add a question on citizenship to the 2020 census over objections from senior career officials at the Census Bureau. without putting you on a spot, is this true? And how heavily involved was the Census Bureau in this decision-making?
So we were involved in the technical review that the Secretary had asked for. Again, we made the recommendation of using administrative records, but we noted there was some strengths and weaknesses to that approach. There were some strengths and weaknesses to putting a question on the questionnaire, and there were some strengths and weaknesses associated with not doing anything at all. After that, it was up to the Secretary to use that information with other information that he gleaned from talking with legal staff and with talking to, for instance, the 6 former directors, a number of other stakeholders from across the country, sort of on both sides of this question. And he made that decision. The Census Bureau is an apolitical professional organization, and we will do our best to do a safe and secure and complete and accurate census that we are directed to do so by the department and by the Congress. So I do want to emphasize, though, that nothing has changed in terms of the security and sort of the culture that the Census Bureau brings to the table in terms of providing, making sure that the data are kept confidential. The census will remain to be safe and secure. We will not share statistical information with other government agencies. This will not go to law enforcement. So we work hard also to make sure that everybody feels like participating in the census is an important part of their civic duty. And so, we will continue to do so, whether the question is on the form or not.
Well, I just want you to remember something, and I don't expect you, nor will I ask you to comment on this unless you want to. So I don't want to bring you into waters you shouldn't be in. But it's clear to everybody that there is tension in this country between some minority groups and other people and the Justice Department and some of their comments and some of their views and how they handle certain things. So if you're worried about that, and then you read or you hear that the Justice Department is asking the Department of Commerce, i.e. the Census Bureau, to put this question in, your immediate reaction is this can't be good. Finding out whether I'm a citizen or not, it's not a problem. But why are they asking this question? And the belief on the street, if you will, and we get to hear the people on the street, is that it's done to keep people from signing up and not being counted, and that helps in redistricting and so on. Who knows? But when fears start to grow, they're very hard to stop. Just like I told you before, when you ask me where I was born, and you don't ask Mr. Kilmer, and I'm not picking on him, where he was born, you're actually drawing a line between us. You're saying that I'm a citizen, but different than he, because I had to put down where I was born, and he did not. And that creates all kinds of mind games that we've been dealing with for a lot of years. We've made a lot of progress in this country, but we still have a lot of things to do. Mr. Jarmin, as you know, numerous members of Congress, including myself, have expressed serious concerns about the impact of the citizenship question. Dr. Jarmin, what is the latest point at which content changes could be made to the 2020 census questions without causing disruption to ensure that printed forms and information technology systems are still ready in time for Census Day? In other words, if my amendment, and I will have an amendment, wins, and then you guys will hate me because you'll have to change the forms. What is the time?
So thank you for the question, ranking member. But so let me tell you, we will never hate you, regardless of. So I used to work with his brother. So
My brother did 30 years, right, with
Yeah.
the Census Bureau, and I want you to know, that, Mr. Chairman, for the record, and for any report in the room, that he got that job before I came to Congress.
So in our plans, I think we would like to have everything settled for the questionnaire this fall.
This
Obviously,
fall?
yeah, that's in our plans. That, that reflects our inherent conservatism
Putting a lot
on
of
these
pressure on the
matters.
chairman, to accept my amendment.
But there's time after that. If it extends beyond, say, next spring, early summer, I mean, you're getting into where changes are gonna cost money. So obviously, the Census Bureau would like this resolved very quickly.
Can I ask one more and then turn it over? Secretary Ross's memo asserts that, quote, "No one provided evidence that there are residents who would respond accurately to a decennial census that did not contain a citizenship question, but would not respond if it did." However, at the very end of the Secretary's memo, he announces, quote, "To minimize any impact on the decennial census response rates, I'm directing the Census Bureau to place the citizenship question last on the decennial census form." Doesn't this suggest that the department knows that there will be a very real and negative impact associated with adding this question? If so, why isn't the department testing the question as part of the 2018 end-to-end test currently being conducted in Rhode Island?
So, thank you. So I think there's two parts to that question. One was, whether or not there was, about the response rate. And so I think, both the Census Bureau and other external folks highlighted that was a concern to the Secretary. I think he recognizes that concern. There was not a lot of direct evidence to say that, it would be X percent of a increase in non-response. So he made a cost-benefit decision, using several criteria. So I think that's how he came to that conclusion. In terms of putting the question last, I think that is a mitigation thing, to make sure that if someone's going through the questionnaire and if they are put off by that question, that they complete as much of the questionnaire before that as possible. We are also doing other things to mitigate possible negative impacts of the question. So we have right now a survey out in the field called the Census Barriers and Attitudes and Motivators Survey. That's a survey to 50,000 people to ask their basic, their likelihood to participate in the census and what makes them more likely to participate or not to participate. Associated with that, we have focus groups from around the country. Enrique Lamas is heading to Puerto Rico this afternoon to participate in some of those.
There's a game there tonight between the Indians and the Twins.
Yeah.
Okay. Good answer.
So if we see him on, Twitter or something at a baseball game. But so we've instructed the folks that are sort of moderating those focus groups to add an inquiry about people's attitudes about the citizenship question. So we'll use this data to work with our advertising and our partnership specialists to try to come up with strategies to do, just like you said, to make people understand that participating in the census is important, that it's safe and secure, and that we need everybody to participate.
One closing comment on my comment about, the territories being counted differently. And again, for any reporter listening to me, this is not a statement against non-citizens. But here's the truth. If you're living in New York and you are here legally, you'll be counted in the census as part of the population of the United States. If you're living in Puerto Rico and you are therefore a citizen, you won't be counted in the population of the United States. Something's wrong with that picture, and I don't think when they wrote the Constitution, they necessarily closed the door on what interpretations we can give it. I know they don't like me to say it's a moving document or evolving document, but it has been. And I would hope that the census continues to study the issue of can you or will you include the territories in the total population of the United States? Because we're cheating ourselves as a country. We actually have more people than we claim we have.
So I'm sure there's a lawyer who has an opinion on that, but we'll definitely take that back and
I have
have
an
some
opinion on
conversations. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
We need to remember those people are part of the United States, and also the extra territorial, I mean, the exclusive economic zone. The United States is about, land-wise, 50% larger than we actually realize because of the territories and all the underwater exclusive economic zone that we have as a result.
This is something that's
You're not
trouble.
Not on. Try it again. You good? Okay, go.
This is something that's troubled elected officials for a while. So when I go to a church, as I have been doing for a few years now, and saying, please sign the form, just fill it out, no information, nobody is going to pass this on to anyone else, I was telling them the truth.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
It's important for people to know that. I'm confident that the census form probably says that too. So when you're filling it out, it says
It does say that.
your information's private, it's not going to be shared,
Yeah.
no worries.
It also says your response is required by law.
Yeah. I don't want to be sure, because when we get to full committee, that we all understand it. The testimony you've had here today is that you don't expect that the presence of this question is going to have a less than 1% impact, and probably far less than that.
So I think it's hard to predict what that would be. So, I mean, I'm not in the business of
Plus, it's confidential
predicting
anyway.
the future, but it is confidential, and I think this is something that we need to, part of the way how we react, and, people will follow what their leaders do, and I think this is something where if we assure people, regardless of what questions are on the form, that participating in the census is an absolutely essential thing to do,
Yeah.
then we will be in good shape.
And it's confidential. Tax,
I was going to apologize for all the questions we've asked on one subject, but I think you came ready to answer those questions because you suspected that would be a question. Let me show you something. I told you before that I was personally upset, right? Some other people may be upset. This is the way it will appear, and I'll share it with my colleagues. It says, is this person a citizen of the United States? And the first option is yes, born in the United States. That should be the end of it. Then it says, the second option, yes, born in Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, or Northern Marianas. That makes it look to anyone like being born in one of these places makes you a citizen different than being born in the United States. That might have been true when you had territories that were not states yet, and they were not incorporated, that whole issue. But the world has changed. I mean, when we have a war, we send people from those territories, and they can't refuse to go. And that's the line I always use, because that's a sign of who they are. This is really opens the door for people to just say they're not like us, they're different. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I get an email after this saying, so how'd you get to be a member of Congress? Do you qualify? I say, I may not qualify, but I certainly qualify citizenship-wise. So pin this up somewhere and look at it and see if you get the same feelings I get. The Census Bureau's National Advisory Committee on Racial, Ethnic, and Other Populations, which among other things advises the Census Bureau on issues affecting immigrant populations, did not request the addition of a question on citizenship. Is that correct? And that doesn't that also undermine the case for including the question?
So you say that they did not request the question?
Right.
Yeah, the request came from the Department of Justice.
Wow. And did they comment on it, do you know? Or did the Committee on Racial, Ethnic, and Other Populations?
So we've not had a meeting of that group since the Secretary's decision, so.
I see. This is the scary part, you know, that I told you about before. The fact that it came from the Justice Department. And one has to wonder, why would the Justice Department want to know that? That's the climate we're living in, you know?
So their letter stated that it was for enforcement of the Voting Rights Act.
Well, you enforce the Voting Rights Act by making sure that sheriffs don't stop people on their way to vote like they did in Florida when President Obama was running for office. You do other things. I can give you a list of things you do. You don't stop people from voting on that day. You make it easy for them to vote. How finding out if a person's a citizen is going to protect the Voting Rights Act is beyond me because, you know, let me tell you something I know about the undocumented. They're terrified of the way they live. They're not in your face telling you, I'm here and I'm undocumented. The last thing on their mind is to go register to vote and commit such a crime. That's the last thing on their mind. Would they like to vote? Yes, they're coming into a whole new place where there's democracy and freedoms for everyone. But trust me, this is not about the Voting Rights Act. And my problem is that I'm embarrassed to say I haven't figured out what it's about. Next question, did anyone at the Census Bureau or the Commerce Department meet with officials from the Department of Justice or any outside group regarding the original request to add a citizenship question? Did anyone from the White House contact the Census Bureau or Commerce Department about this request? If so, will you please provide the names of those individuals and groups that met with Commerce Department officials?
So I can't speak for Commerce Department officials. I can say for the Census Bureau that I do not believe that we met with anyone from DOJ or the White House about this question.
Well, if you didn't meet, you say you don't believe, so could there be someone else that met from
No,
the department?
I don't think so.
But you're pretty sure that no one met. The final 2018 Omnibus Appropriations Agreement directed the Census Bureau to ensure that its fiscal year 2018 partnership and communications activities in support of the census, the 2020 census, are conducted at a level of effort and staffing no less than that conducted during fiscal year 2008 in preparation for the 2010 census. Please explain for us the ways in which the Census Bureau is working to abide by this directive of the committee and ensure that the partnership and communications efforts are at least as strong this year as they were at this same point 10 years ago.
So thank you, Ranking Member. So I think, so first of all, we started the partnership program earlier this time. We have 40 partnership specialists, seasoned specialists in the field right now. We've had them since the beginning of 2017. We have a team at Census who's looking into both on the communication and the partnership program of using those appropriations to accelerate both our planning for the communications campaign, hopefully so that we can get some ad buys done earlier and save some money, but also to start ramping up the partnership program this year. In addition, the main thing that we're looking at is also accelerating our scalability testing of our system so that we can get out ahead of that a little bit and sort of buy down some risk. But again, we have a team working on that right now. We're in conversations with both the department and the OMB about how we plan to do that. Once we have those conversations, we'll be glad to come back and talk to you guys about what exactly we're going to do.
Thanks, Chairman.